Hi, my name is Nick Jaluzek. I am the Odd Artist and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Wanhao Duplicator 7. I'm going to show you how to get it printing straight from the box. Let's go! And we'll start with the unboxing process. First I'm going to be opening up the box, taking everything out of it before looking at all the individual pieces. It was well packaged, it was tough cardboard. One issue is that the handles did expose the inside to any outside environmental dangers, but inside everything was wrapped in plastic very nicely, not having to worry about that in all seriousness. So coming out, had the manuals, had some extra FEP sheets, as well as an additional vat that I ordered with this printer in a bundle. The printer itself, the lid pulled off, and then you have all the precious electronic components wrapped in plastic. Everything was zip tied together nicely so it wouldn't rattle around in shipping. Having some accessories like an extra Allen key, spatula, power cord coming out first. And then here we have the build plate was attached to this small box. So the build plate very nicely constructed. Small box held a few more accessories. Inside we have the USB cable. We had a small plastic tub for holding something like your IPA alcohol when you want to rinse your parts off. Taking off the original vat for the machine just to look at the screen below and putting it back on. With some simple thumb screws, it gets tightened in place, and then the bed platform just screws on to the Z-axis gantry. Comes together very quick in terms of the mechanics behind it. Just checking over the manual, making sure I didn't miss anything and all parts were included. And the lid just fits on nicely, and I think it looks great. One thing you need to know about these printers, they are messy, messy, messy. So do yourself a favor and lay down some plastic on whatever surface you're about to work on. I'm just going to be using a trash bag over the top of my desk as a temporary fix for today, since I'm doing the video recording, but it'll save us down the line. A lot of mess can happen. So I'm going to take my printer, put it on the plastic, and then we're going to start plugging in the cords, starting off with the HDMI cord. It is a display that's on the printer, which needs its signal sent to it through the HDMI from your computer. Up next will be the power cord. You gotta have power. And then something that's not being shown is also the USB cable. Didn't plug that in here, but you also have it connected to your computer via USB, which is a USB B to A cord, which is provided with the printer. I'll take off the lid, set that off to the side so we can do all of the work we need to with the internals. Now we're going to start attaching our pieces, such as the build plate that we are going to hook on to the printer's Z gantry, making sure there's a gap between the thumb screw and the build plate. That just slides into place and gets tightened down, making sure it's all the way back. Up next, we're going to be getting the resin vat. This hunk of metal that has a plastic sheet attached to the bottom called FEP film. I'm going to first clean that off using isopropyl alcohol. We don't want any smudges on here at all. We want to make sure that it is spotless. So I'm going to take my time, use a few different shop towel rags, and wipe it down really well. And once that is clean, I'm then also going to take a second to wipe down the LCD display screen just to make sure that there's nothing left behind there before I sandwich them together. The vat just goes straight down onto these two threaded rods sticking up from the printer, and with two small thumb screws, it gets tightened down. We don't want to make it too tight. We could risk cracking the LCD screen, just snug, so that it's not going to wiggle around on us. Perfect. Alright, so to get our life in order and get this printer set up, we're going to need to get our software together. Now you would think you would go to wanhao3printer.com and be able to download whatever slicing software you need for it. That's not the case, necessarily. So on the website, when you find your way and you navigate to the product support for Wanhao Duplicator 7, you will find USB drivers to download if you have issues with your computer connecting. I think if you already have other drivers installed, say from working with Arduinos or something in the past, you don't need to worry about it, but you can find it here on the Wanhao website. You'll find copies of the firmware which can be installed onto the printer itself. In case something seems to go wrong, you need to reflash the firmware. You can find it, as long as with instructions on how to do that. As well as if you're looking to install Nano DLP, which is when you can hook up a Raspberry Pi to the printer to make it wireless, to enable it to interact over Wi-Fi. That's something that I will do in a future video once I figure that out for myself. But so on the direct wanhao3dprinter.com, you will not find the slicing software you need. So instead, we're going to go to wanhaosupport.com. I wasn't able to find any kind of link that brought me from the Wanhao 3D printer website to their support website, but you can just type in the web address directly. You'll find yourself here in this forum that nobody uses, and then you go over to downloads. We are using the Wanhao Duplicator D7, so we'll go there, and then we can click download to download a zip file of Creation Workshop, which is version 1.0.0.75, which is antiquated. It's outdated. It says here the last time it was updated was 2017 in November 21st. That's not too long ago, but there have been some great improvements thanks to the community around this printer. And to get to that type of file, we're going to go to the Wanhao Duplicator 7 Facebook group. You'll have to add yourself as a member, register, and then you can access the files that are located here. And there's been a lot of community support in developing Creation Workshop X, which they've upgraded many different things. You can read all about it throughout the history of how it's been changed in their change logs. But this is the one that I would recommend downloading and starting with. Forget the old version, start with CWX from the Facebook group. If you don't have Facebook and you don't want to log in, I will host the current file on my own website. I'll have a link in the description below, but you will be able to access it another way if you don't want to use Facebook or access it that way. So it'll download as a zip file. We'll be able to open that up, and we will want to extract this. We're going to extract this. I'm just going to extract it to my documents folder for now. So we're at the CWX 1.2.4's folder, and right here is the executable. We want to open that up, and lo and behold, we have a beautiful Creation Workshop screen. We've got the build volume here. I believe it's already set the defaults for what the Wanhao printer is, but we'll need to go through a couple things to get this up and running. Going over the configure settings, we are going to set up our printer with a new printer profile. So I'm going to name this one D7 setup video since I'm creating it for the purpose of this video, but you can name yours whatever you want. There's a few different things that we'll need to set up in here. One thing is knowing that as I edit, I need to go back and I need to make sure that I am in fact editing the one that I want to edit. And here we have a few things to adjust. First, I need to configure what port my printer is connected to. In this case, it is communication port 4 that I know my printer is selected. We do not need to control an X and Y axis. We do need a Z axis. We don't have any tilt controls or extruders or heated platforms to worry about. I do like to be able to control whether the motor is on or off. Entering manual G-code and controlling the projector are all things we want to keep. Apply those changes. And whenever I do that, it's telling me I need to configure at least one display device. What that means is over here, it lists the two displays on my computer. It lists display 1, which is the monitor that I'm working off of right now, and then display 2, which is what the printer shows up as when it's connected through the HDMI port on my computer. So to make sure that that is set up, we're going to go to our display settings on our operating system. And I'm looking at my first monitor. That's fine and dandy. That's still the same default. That's my main display. And I'm going to go to number 2 and make sure that this is set up where the resolution is maxed out with 2560 and 1440. It is set to landscape orientation, and it is an extension of the display. So it's acting as the second screen that's extended off of it. I do not want it to duplicate or only show one or the other. So that's set up great, just how it was when I plugged it in. I will then need to make sure I select the proper display, noting the resolution values, and add that over as our configured display. That is now set up. That is the display that the printer knows to send its screen image to from this slicing software. It looks like once I did that, I need to re-enable our serial communication so we can control it via serial commands. with G-code, and everything else is okay. This adjustment size here we might need to play with later on. Once we do a calibration piece, we'll be able to make sure that it is calibrated in X, Y, and Z dimensions for the parts that we are printing. We're going to apply these changes, and then we're going to jump over to our control tab. Over here is where we see the control that we had before. We have our Z-axis control to move it up and down. We can turn the motors on or off, entering manual G-code, and then we can change the rate at which the Z moves up and down from our controls. And then our projector control allows us to control whether or not there's certain things shown on the screen in order to test it. And so all of this is useless to us until we do one thing, and that is to connect our printer. So right up here, 2 plugs going into each other. Our printer is now connected. I now have control if I want to lower the Z-axis or raise it, and we're set with that. Up next is making sure that our Z plate, our build plate, is home to the proper position. Using the Allen wrench tool that came with the printer, I'm going to loosen all 4 screws that you would find on the gantry. This is going to allow for the build plate to freely hang off of the Z gantry, and so once I lower it down, it's going to get into position nicely since it's loosely hanging right now. So once it is loosened, I can come over back to our Creation Workshop and I can hit the homing Z button right here, which will cause our printer's Z-axis to drop down until it meets the optical end stop point. Now with the printer going down on the Z-axis, it's going to bring the gantry to the 0 position, and with the loose build plate, it's going to make sure that it's sitting flat and level with the FEP film, and therefore with also the LCD display. Once it's lowered, I'm going to use the same Allen tool to tighten all of the screws, keeping some pressure with my fingers, pushing it down, making sure that it's flat and level with that build plate, just making sure everything's snug again. So up next, before we get all gung-ho about pouring in resin and trying to get a model sliced and printing, we want to make sure that our printer works. And to do that, we're going to use a couple G-code commands to make sure that our LED that's inside, our UV LED, that's the big powerhouse of the whole printer, is working. And so to do that, we're going to be in Creation Workshop, making sure our printer is connected still, turning on manual G-code commands, and then there's really 4 G-code commands to worry about here. First, I'm going to turn on the internal cooling fan using the code S255. What that's saying is it's going to start up the fan at 255, which is the maximum value that you can set. I believe that has something to do with pulse width modulation commands that get sent to the fan. Don't quote me on that. But that we're going to send that, it's going to turn on our fan printer. With that on, I can then feel comfortable enough to turn on our LED by typing in 106, M106. That now turns on our LCD display. Now with nothing sent to this display, it is acting just as if there is a second screen on the printer. And so right now it's actually showing what the desktop of my second monitor would normally look like, where I think right now it's a picture of flowers that I took. And so that's all we see there. There are a couple commands that you can put in within Creation Workshop. Here I can show blank, so it kind of blacks out everything on the display, or I can have it show calibration, which it might be too faint to see on camera, but there will be a small grid that shows up. Maybe I can get it to focus. Yep, we can see some parts of the grid showing up. It's very faint, but that allows you to kind of see the grid lines of the print as it's going. And so this tells me that it is working. I can hide it, just show it like a normal display, or show blank. I know the LED is working, and now we want to turn it off. So we're going to go and we're going to hit M107 to turn off our light, and then we can turn off the fan as well by setting it to a power level of 0 with S0. Simple G-code commands, pretty much the only ones you'll need to worry about since we have the other controls within Creation Workshop, just to test our light before we start pouring in resin. So let's get to that now. Let's pour some resin. So I'm going to be using Photocentric Red Hard UV resin. I ran out of the Wanhao gray that came with my printer, and so I only have this around, and it came in a bundle with my printer. But before I get started, I'm going to first protect my hands. This stuff is nasty. It can irritate your skin, and so I'm going to put on gloves, nitrile or latex. Make sure it's powder-free. I'm going to get those on before I ever handle anything with the resin. And once I'm back to using this printer regularly, pretty much everything around it gets resin on it at some point in time, and it becomes sticky, and it gets on your hands. It makes them smell. It's not great. So just wear gloves. So I'm just going to pour this resin in. We don't need too much. Let's see how this goes. Ooh, look at that red. That's beautiful. Don't want to overfill it. The build plate does need to come down, and that will cause the resin level to rise. We don't need to overfill it. And if we need to add more later during a print, we can always pour more in. It's not a big deal. And now with that set up, I can take off my gloves. I even already got some on my fingers. That's why we always wear gloves. And I'll take these off and use them again later. Just won't turn them inside out. The next step in the process for us is going to be setting up our slicing profile. So we're going to jump back over to the Configure tab within Creation Workshop, and we will go, instead of configuring the machine, we will configure the slicing profile. I'm going to create a new profile, and given the resin that I'm using here, it's Photocentric Hard Red, and I'm going to try to set up this profile to be printing at a layer height of 50 microns, so 0.05 millimeters. And I'm going to make sure that is selected here. There are some defaults that already show up within the list, but I'm going to start from my own, from scratch. So this is all going to be set up for printing with this resin at just this layer height. You're going to have to change numbers depending on if you want to make higher or lower layer heights within the printer. But 0.05 millimeters. Exposure times is something that you might not know right away. If you're using some off-brand resin and you can't find any info online, I would first recommend trying to look at the Facebook group or forums and find out if anyone has done anything already with it and are releasing information. But if not, it's anyone's game. You could be as low as 1 second per layer. It could be as high as 20 seconds per layer. There is one resource that kind of helps, and that is going to 3dprinterwiki.info. They have a page all about the D7 resins that some people have released information on. So we can come down here and they have this nice spreadsheet. So I know that I'm using Photocentric. I'm just going to have it sort this by the brand and see if there's anything similar to red listed here, because I couldn't find anything on the Photocentric website to give me exact details on how long the exposure time should be on the D7. So looking here, we have the Photocentric brands. I am using UV Hard brand. I'm not using gray, but that'll be close enough for us. So looking over along the way, if it's going to, show for us, there we go. So looking at these exposure times for 50 microns layer height, we are talking about it being a 50-second base cure time. So the base layers are the first 2, 3, 4 layers that it will cure, attaching itself to the build plate before it moves on to the rest of the layers. So at 50 microns, 50 seconds for the base layers, and then 12 seconds for every layer after that. So we'll jump back to Creation Workshop, set that up to be 12 seconds exposure time for every other layer except for the bottom layers, which we will have as 50 seconds for each. And that is a considerable amount of time. There are resins that do it much faster, but this is a hard resin. It's supposed to be very durable and strong. That's the hope anyway. So it will take longer to cure. And I'm going to do 4 base layers. You want to do at least 2, 3, 4 is a safe number so that you have a strong adhesive layer on the bottom of your build plate. Most of the time you're going to be printing things with supports lifting them up off the build plate. So the more bottom layers you have, it will create kind of an elephant's foot. It'll smush out on the sides, and that's okay when you have supports that are going to take that damage, not the bottom of your part. So enable slice size calculation, sure, why not? Enable outlines. Yeah, it's nice to be able to see outlines when, no, we don't want to do with that actually. Later we'll do with that. Image reflection, we don't need to reflect on any axis. It'll just print how it prints. This is a resin profile that if we wanted to put in a price, we could calculate the price of how much it'll cost. I don't know the price of this offhand, I got it in a bundle. Looking over our other settings for when it moves, not when it's curing, but when it's moving, how long is it going to sit there with nothing on the screen in order to kind of let the resin settle into place. Lifting distance, 5 millimeters is kind of a lot. We'll lower that down to 4. Lift speed, 50 millimeters in my experience has been too fast, and that'll cause warping and failures in your parts if it lifts too fast. That's once it's cured the layer, it wants to lift it up. It needs to peel it off of that plastic FEP sheet. And if it does that too fast, you're going to have warping or parts falling off your build plate. So I'm going to lower this down to 30, see if that works. We can always increase it later if we want to try to improve our print speeds and find the balance between speed and quality. We can do that later. Z bottom speed is how fast it moves back down, just to keep things consistent. We'll just leave that at 30 as well. And then everything else here is fine. Leaving those as the defaults. I've never played with them before. Don't think I need to now. So I'm going to apply these changes, and we have our resin profile set up. Next step is to set up our print. So jumping over to our 3D view, we need to get a model to put in here. So to find that part, we're going to go to Thingiverse for a wonderful calibration piece. We just search for SLA test model. It should pop up, boom, first one right here. SLA test model has all of these intricate details on it that allow us to really see the capability of this printer. It has very, very small details that print on the top, so we can see how it can do it as it's building up layers. It has very narrow structures within this X and this X that allow us to see how delicate of pieces it can create. These sections here can show you how much gap you can get between two pieces in terms of if you're trying to have a part that maybe prints in place or something like that. You can get an idea of what your spacing needs to be before the two sides fuse together due to maybe over curing is what we want to limit. Also, you have some pieces, the whole cube itself, as well as some of these other random pieces to check for dimensional accuracy. So it's a great model. That's what we're going to use. It also has one listed that has support pieces already built into the model itself, which is what we're going to use just so that we don't have to worry about the bottom of the model having issues when we first do our print. So we're going to download this. We will come back to our workshop. We will open up this file right there from our downloads folder, and it's small. That's another nice thing about this part, is it's small, so it doesn't take too long to print. All right, so we have this here, and then all we need to do is tell it to slice it. I want to make sure it's using the photocentric hard red 50 micron layers profile that we've built before. It's going to go through the model and it will slice it up. It's going to create 280 layers. That's because this model is tall enough where there's going to be that many layers. It's 140 millimeters tall, so it'll make 280 layers because each one is 0.5 millimeters. No, I'm messing all those numbers up. Ignore my math. I'm messing it up. But so that's sliced. If you want to get an idea of what it looks like in each slice, you can make the model somewhat transparent, and then we can also show the slice preview on the screen. When we go to the slice view, there's a couple ways you can see every slice, and this is what it will appear as on the screen, on the display, on the LCD of the printer. That's what it will look like. You can see the G-code itself if you want to scroll down and have, you know, a nice reading. Or over here, we want to show the slicing on our 3D view. There we go. Now we've got it showing up here. You can see the slices coming through the model, and we want to make sure things aren't going to have overhangs or they're going to start printing out without any kind of support material off to the side, and so you can just see everything that prints using that preview. So this is sliced. It's ready to go. One thing we need to do is make sure that our printer is home, so we can click the home button one more time. Oh, and now that I think about it, there's one more thing we need to do within our slicing profile. Every time you make a new profile within Creation Workshop, this is a very important step. Every time you create a new profile, the default G-code is messed up. It's missing the parts where it actually tells it to turn on the LED on and off, which is unfortunate and it's frustrating, but it's just something that we need to fix. So let me get copies of that in the link in the description below, where you'll be able to just copy and paste over these G-code commands. You can work off of them and we'll get that ready. So we have our model in place. I just changed things at our slicing profile, so I'm gonna have to re-slice our model. And that shouldn't take too long since I already did it once before. So it's going to slice this model, it'll be ready to go, and then we'll be ready to start printing it. So as soon as this is ready, I'm gonna go over to the control, home our printer one final time to make sure that that build plate is sitting down onto the surface. And I'm gonna hit play. And then we will be off and ready to go. It will begin the printing process by turning the UV off and on as it prints. After every layer, it's going to raise it up, and it is going to be a beautiful process. All right, the print is coming up. Let's see how it did. Oh, what are we looking at here? Okay. So, the part's there, but a side effect is that I think at some point in time I had a screen pop up on the second display from some software that I had opened up, caused it to cure an excess bit of resin. Good thing this is just a test print. Not a big deal. I'm going to take off the build plate, loosening that knob at the top. I'm going to allow for the excess resin to drip off back into the resin vat. And since the resin is not 100% cured when it comes off the printer, I'm just going to peel off this wasted resin plastic film. It's just so we can get a better look at the model itself. Make sure all the resin drips off so I don't make a mess. Let's see if we can get a closer look at the model itself on the print results. The camera is not focusing. It is a really small part, so I don't think I'll be able to zoom in enough and still focus. I think we'll have to change things up a little bit. But there's our part. I'm going to pop this off the build plate using the plastic spatula that came with the printer. It's got a small surface area. I'm just going to kind of push it and it just pops off. Perfect. Boom. I'm going to put the build plate back on and we can take a little bit of a closer look at this right after we rinse it off in some IPA. Isopropyl alcohol is going to dissolve the excess resin that is on our part, and we'll be able to get a better look at it. And here I have a small container filled with isopropyl alcohol, throwing my part in, and I'm just going to swish it around to have the excess resin dissolve into the alcohol. Not going to be too thorough about it since this is just a test part, and I already know there are some issues with it when we saw that extra layer of resin that was cured due to user error. Once this dries off, we'll be able to take a closer look at all the details. And here's the part. So I even had to hook on a macro extension tube onto my camera to try to get these shots because of how small this is. It's incredible what this machine can do. Here is a part that shows incredibly small details. Look at the small X's in the middle of that, as well as the X's in the top piece there. And this is without any proper calibration for this resin profile. This is me just finding some random numbers online, seeing how it went. Every printer is a little bit different, so they will all require some kind of calibration for whatever resin you're using. But I'm still just amazed every time that I pull a print off of this printer at the quality that it can create for such a low cost. Thank you for stopping by and watching my video. I hope you got something out of it. I know I did just from making it. I hope you learned something. If you're interested in getting this printer, I highly recommend it. At the price point, I don't think it can be beat. There's a lot to still be learned. I hope to make more videos in the future. I know today it was just about getting it from box to printing. I know there were some mistakes on this part as well, so I want to make more videos covering how to calibrate it, how to post-process your prints, what you can expect from this printer in terms of its output capabilities. So please let me know in the comments below anything you'd like to see in the future, what you liked from this one, what you hated from this one. I'd love to hear it all. Leave the comments down below. And again, if you're interested in more content that I hope to create in the future, hit that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up. However you want to support me, it would be very much appreciated. Thanks. Take care. Bye. And as a treat for sticking around to the end of the video, here are a few shots of parts that I was able to print using the Wanhao gray resin that came with my printer. Just a few random odds and ends, bits, pieces that I thought turned out all really well. Little to no post-processing on these, just removing of support material that might have been there. I really liked how they all turned out, and it just shows what amazing things this printer can do. Thanks again. Bye.